We still have time. If you want, we can go back home, said Jimin, giving a soft squeeze to your hand. You let out a sigh, glancing outside at the huge mansion through the window. Why are you so hell-bent on going back? We are literally outside your house. Your mama looking back to meet his eyes. You already know, he replied, staring right through your eyes. The intensity of his gaze made you look away. Another sigh brushed past your lips as silence made room between you both. I hate to say this, but my mother isn't very fond of you. I have witnessed how she makes you feel awful every time we meet her. I just don't like to put you in the same situation over and over again, he whispered after a brief moment of silence. This is the reason, Jimin. This is why I don't want us to go back. She has invited us for dinner, and if we went back, she would get another reason to not like me. You explained, intertwining your hands with his. But I don't like it when she behaves rudely with you, he said, looking down at your interlaced fingers. On top of that, you don't let me say anything to her. That's wrong. She's your mother, Jimin, you exclaimed. And you are my wife, he countered, peering at your eyes. Just because she's my mother doesn't give her the right to say whatever she wants. Okay, calm down. Let's go inside and have dinner with them. It's a matter of few hours. I think we can manage that, right? He looked at him hopefully while he looked away, not liking the idea of joining his family for dinner. His mother wasn't very fond of you, and she would find a way or another to make you feel that you were not wanted in the family. This always made him furious. This was the reason he distanced himself from his family. Was when he got a call from his mother that she wanted him to join them for dinner, he denied it, but you insisted that he should go. He agreed, but with a condition that he wouldn't go without you, his wife. You weren't willing to, but you reluctantly agreed because you didn't want to give his mother another reason to hate you, as if she already hadn't enough. And here you were outside his house, contemplating whether you both should go in or just return to your little sanctuary. Let's go, you muttered, tugging at his hand. I hate you. I hate how you always manage to convince me of the things I don't want to do, he said, his voice hinting the distaste about the whole ordeal. You chuckled and pressed a kiss at the corner of his mouth. You're the best husband, and as long as you are by my side, I don't care what others says about me. You confessed with utter sincerity. But I do. If anyone says a word to you, I don't care who, I'm not going to sit like a mannequin. Whether you squeeze my hand, give signal through your eyes, or even kick me under the table, my lips won't stay sealed. He won't bending down to press a kiss on your forehead. Jimin, he cut you off by pressing his lips to yours, sealing them in a shearing kiss. After a few moments, he pulled back with a loud smooch. Let's go, he whispered, rubbing his thumb at the corner of your lips to wipe the slightly smudged lipstick. The slight wedge of his lips insinuated that he was proud of the mess he just made. Stepping inside the vast living room, you looked around. The house was the same as you last time saw it, reeking of luxury. Every other corner was occupied by expensive decorative pieces, imported as Gemma's mother liked to name them. Though every corner of the house screamed prosperity, it lacked the inviting warmth of a home. It was just a mansion. It didn't excite you to come back over and over again. Every time it just gave you a new bitter memory to add on to the list. Jimin, wine. The train of your thoughts broke when you heard Jimin's father's voice. Noticed him descending the stairs with a big smile on his face. The corner of your lips lifted in a subtle smile. He was the only one who had accepted you wholeheartedly, considering you not only his son's wife, but his daughter. Look at you two looking so perfect with each other, he exclaimed, stopping in front of you. He was in his mid-60s, a man with handsome features along with years of life experiences. It made him wonder sometimes that Jimin would look exactly like him when he grew old. He hugged Jimin, patting his back affectionately. Parting away from him, he looked at you with the same amount of affection he carried for Jimin. "How's my daughter doing?" he asked, opening his arms for you. With a big smile on your face, you hugged him. Your eyes shut close as he kissed your head affectionately. You felt a tug at your heart as his fatherly warmth wrapped around you like a warm blanket on a chilly night. "He's treating you well, right? Tell me if I need to knock some senses in him," he said, parting away from the hug. You chuckled as Jimin let out a whine and shook your head. "I'm very happy with him, Dad. You have raised a gentleman," he replied, stealing a brief glance at Jimin. He winked at you in response, making you gasp inaudibly. How could he be so shameless in front of his father? You were about to say something, but the ambience suddenly shifted. The air turned heavy as the she-devil graced the living area with her presence. Your smile faded instantly as your gaze noticed her walking in your direction. She wore an elegant ankle-length floral dress. Her shoulder-length hair was meticulously set, waving with every step she took forward, her heels clicking against the floor. She was a graceful lady, enunciating a powerful and indelible aura. Was the definition of beauty and power, but that was how the outside world knew her. You knew her better. She had a sharp tongue and foul mouth. Her harsh words cut deep through you, bringing tears in your eyes. She might be a sweet mother, but she, for sure, was a cruel mother-in-law. "Oh, my son," she muttered, walking past you to hug Jimin, not forgetting to bump her shoulders with you. But this wasn't hidden by Jimin. He noticed what she did, and thus he didn't hug her back. Gently pushing her away, he stepped towards you and held your hand. You watched how her face contorted with anger, eyes blazed with fury, but she again put on a smile and looked at Jimin. "You are late, Jimin. Seems like your wife didn't want you to come here." You closed your eyes as her sharp tongue started oozing poison. You held Jimin's hand and gave a gentle squeeze, knowing the extent of his protectiveness for you. But Jimin wasn't going to stay silent. Not tonight. He retreated his hand from your grip, causing you to open your eyes. You looked at him and slowly shook your head, but he ignored you completely and turned to his mother. "No, mother. My wife didn't say anything to me. In fact, if it weren't her insisting, I wouldn't have shown up in the first place," he responded, slipping his hand around your waist. You blinked as he looked down at you and gave you a reassuring smile. Though you didn't look at her, you could feel her eyes boring hole through your skull. You could imagine her expression, Joe said, eyes widening with anger and hands fisting on her side. She would be looking very scary at this moment. "If you guys are done with meet and greet, could we please have dinner now?" Jimin asked, looking at his mother. "Apparently, we have to leave as my wife and I have to go to work early in the morning." His mother scoffed. The distaste was now evident on her face. She wasn't hiding it anymore. "I can understand you have to go to work early, but her?" she uttered, averting her gaze at you. "She's just a professor." Jimin chuckled humorlessly, his voice flat. "Mother, she's not just a professor. She's a professor, a very renowned and respected one." He said the last sentence while staring directly at your eyes. "Unlike you and I, who inherited the wealth from our former generation, my wife had worked hard to make her name. I have seen how her colleagues and students respect her. I'm the luckiest and the proudest husband ever," he added with a big smile on his face. He never missed a chance to make you cry, of course out of happiness. Just like now, his words brought tears into your eyes. Perhaps you weren't as happy or proud of your profession as he was. "Shall we go and eat, mother? Otherwise I have a backup plan as well," Jimin asked again. You frowned in confusion. What backup plan was he talking about? "My wife to a nice restaurant." We'll dine together and then have a walk alongside a beach. We might go home after that. Our home. Jimin uttered, looking at his mother. He didn't like to talk to his mother in such an ill-mannered way, but he knew she wouldn't understand without getting the taste of her own medicine. Also, he had already tried talking to her, but she didn't understand, or maybe she didn't want to understand. Let's go, dinner is ready. Jimin's father stepped in, having enough of the bitter exchange between the mothers and two. He too was tired of his wife's stubbornness. He just couldn't understand why she was being so harsh on the girl his son loved dearly. Family wealth, my foot. Should have had a family to inherit their wealth. Shama's mother muttered under her breath. She thought no one was listening, but you heard it, and it pierced your heart in the worst way possible. This was one of the biggest reasons for her dislikeness towards you. You were an orphan, lost your parents at a very young age. It was a road accident where they lost their lives, but you survived. The society named you as a bad omen because you survived. Sounds absolute rubbish, right? But that didn't stop Jimin from falling for you. Those college days and those nostalgic romantic moments, they still brought a smile on your face, even on your worst days. Then came the second biggest reason of her not liking you. Despite her incessant pestering, Jimin got married to you. She wanted him to marry a family-oriented wealthy girl, but he married you, an orphan. Oh, how could he? According to her, that was your fault because her son never denied her. You might have cast a spell on him, done some black magic to control his thoughts. After now, you had captured her son in your clutches. Everything could have gone fine after you got married to Jimin, only if she had put down her ego and accepted you. But she didn't. She started behaving adversely with you, taunting you about your parents and whatnot. This caused Jimin to leave the house along with you within a week after your marriage. And it became the third biggest reason for her to hate you, because according to her analogy, you felt Gemma's ES against her that made him decide to leave the house, as if he were a child who was easy to manipulate. These things used to affect you a lot in the beginning, because you wanted a family, but her behavior left you heartbroken. However, none of it mattered now. Jimin had showered you with so much love that made all the hurt disappear. There was just happiness and a loss of love. A smile bloomed on your lips as Jimin pulled a chair for you. From the corner of your eye, you noticed Jimin's mother scoffing at the romantic exchange between you both. But you paid no heed to her and settled on the seat while Jimin occupied the chair on your right side. We can still leave if you want, Jimin whispered in your ear. You shook your head in helplessness and looked at him. It's just a matter of an hour or so. We're going to leave after dinner anyway. I think we can manage till that time. You whispered back, your lips quirking in an assuring smile. He sighed but nodded his head. A few moments later, the dinner was served by the helpers. Jimin, being the caring husband he was, filled your plate with a good amount of food despite your rejection. Your husband, it's my responsibility to make sure my wife's stomach is full of food, her mind full of positivity, and her heart full of love. He iterated the same thing he said every once in a while. You could feel someone's hard gaze boring holes in your skull, and you knew very well who it was. Jimmy's mother couldn't accept the fact that his son was being so sweet to his wife, but he had turned a bit bitter towards her. Deep down, maybe she knew it was her own doings that made her son distance himself from her, but she wasn't going to accept it. Her ego was too big to allow her to accept her mistakes. She would rather choose her death happily than ban in front of you any time in her life. Let's dig in. Jimin's father chimed in. As you were about to take a bite, a voice interrupted. Without me, all the eyes turned towards the source of the voice. There, at the threshold of the dining room, stood Jaehyun, Jimin's younger brother. You watched as Gemma's mother jolted up from her seat, her lips curving in a big grin, splitting her face into two halves. She rushed towards Jaehyun and pulled him in a hug. "Oh, my sweet boy," she exclaimed, her voice extremely sweet. You blinked, a look of disbelief and astonishment marring your face. It came out shocking to you that your mother-in-law could talk sweetly. You had only seen her spitting fire all the time. Tearing your gaze away from her, you glanced at your father-in-law. He looked disappointed. A frown marred your face, observing his expression. You switched your gaze from him to Jimin. He didn't look bothered, but he didn't look pleased either. You nudged Jimin with your elbow. He looked at you and raised an eyebrow. "What happened? Why do you guys look pissed?" You are signaling at your father-in-law with your eyes. "It's nothing, but just maintain good distance with Jaehyun. He's not someone you should interact with often," he whispered. His words made you confused. Nevertheless, you nodded, putting an end to your quest. "Come, we were about to eat. Now you eat with us." You heard your mother-in-law as she escorted Jaehyun towards the dining table. Jimin muttered something under her breath, while his father let out a huge sigh. Amidst all of them, you sat with a frown and confusion written all over your face. They all were acting weird, and you had no idea how you should react to the situation. Jaehyun took a seat in the empty chair on your left. Your face instantly contorted in disgust as his scent hit your nostrils. He reeked of alcohol. Averting your gaze at him, you noticed him closely for the first time. His hair was long and greasy, as if he hadn't washed them in years. He was slightly muscular, but probably an inch or two shorter than Jimin. You could see the tattoos peeking from the neckline of his t-shirt. Had it been Jimin, you would have found it sexy and hot, but it looked creepy on him. Sensing your gaze, he looked at you. The corner of his lips twisted into an ugly smirk as he raked his eyes from your face and down to your body. You cowered back as you felt bugs crawling on your skin wherever his gaze lingered, be it for a moment. Though you were fully dressed, his creepy stare made you feel exposed and humiliated. Now you understood why your husband asked you to maintain distance from him. He wasn't giving you good vibes. "Hi, sister-in-law. It's nice to finally see you. You looked more beautiful in person," he muttered, extending his hand for a handshake. If his gaze and smirk were creepy, his voice was even worse. It made you shudder from inside. "Wish I could say the same to you," you thought in your head, but held yourself back from saying it to his face. You knew your mother-in-law would jump on you with her claws out if you dared to say a single thing about her beloved son, and you didn't want to create a scene either. You just forced out a smile, which you knew would be looking extremely fake. But before you could speak a word, Jimin pulled your chair closer to his. "Eat your food, honey," he muttered loud enough for Jaehyun to hear. Relief washed over you when you felt Jimin's hand on your shoulder. You looked at him, your lips quirking in a relieved smile. The creeps, the chills, everything faded away as the familiar sensation of Jimin's warmth and affection enveloped your senses. "Oh, hello, brother. Long time no see." Jaehyung spoke, smiling at Jimin. But Jimin didn't reciprocate it. He just gave him a blank stare and looked back at you. "Finish your dinner, okay? We'll go home after that." Jimin reiterated. You nodded and started eating, forcing the food down your throat because you had already lost your appetite by the constant lingering smell of alcohol sitting right beside you. The dinner was an uncomfortable ordeal. It was awkwardly silent and full of tension. The occasional glares of your mother-in-law and your creepy brother-in-law made you uncomfortable. You wouldn't have dinner in peace. Deep down, you regretted not listening to Jimin. He was right. You shouldn't have come here in the first place, or you would have left when he was asking you to go home. At least you wouldn't be sitting between these weird people. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the dinner came to an end. As the helpers came to clear the dishes, you got up instantly and hooked your arm around Jimin's. He looked down at you as if trying to fathom out your feelings. Shall we leave? He spoke after a brief moment of silence. You instantly nodded in response, wanting a way out of the uncomfortable ambience which was giving you knots of anxiety. You internally danced in happiness as you both were finally going home. But things never go our way, right? Jimin's father called out for him. Jimin, can I speak to you for a moment? He probed. Jimin nodded, walking towards him, dragging you along. Jimin's father smiled at you and then looked back at Jimin. Can we talk in my study room for a while? It's important. He probed, stealing a brief glance at you. Jimin understood his insinuations. He wanted to speak to him alone, but Jimin couldn't leave you alone with his mother and his brother. Dad, can we talk about it tomorrow? He asked. If it weren't important, I wouldn't have stopped you. Wine can wait in the living room. It's just a matter of few minutes. His father replied, now looking at you. By his expression, you know he was serious, or he would have never asked Jimin to leave you alone. Removed your hands from Jimin's arms and gave a slight encouraging nod. Go on, I'll be in the living room, you said, holding his hand and giving a soft, reassuring squeeze. Are you sure? He asked, peering directly at your eyes. Sure, sharing the same room with your mother-in-law was like a nightmare coming to life. It wasn't like you wouldn't answer back to her insults. You just couldn't bring yourself to respond in the same tone as hers. You knew your kind attitude was costing you too much, but you couldn't help it. You grew up like that. He only nodded and forced out a smile. For a moment, he just stared at you, internally grappling with his thoughts, and then, reluctantly, he pulled his hand out of your grip. I won't take long, I promise, he whispered. Paused as he followed his father to his study room. He looked at the other two persons you were left alone with, and all of a sudden, you couldn't breathe. Their eyes were already stuck on you. One pair was glaring, and the other one was just checking you out. You cursed your fate under your breath and retired to the living room. You loved Jamin, you loved him with all your heart, but you couldn't deny the fact that his family always made you uncomfortable. His father was nice, but his mother always made you feel like you didn't belong there. And if she were any less, his brother turned out to be even creepier. You were done now. You gave up. You wouldn't make more effort to establish a good relationship with his family if they weren't ready to do the same. If they weren't ready to accept you, you wouldn't waste any more of your energy on them. Jimin was right all along. As he said, you were trying to plant flowers on a barren land. You were losing your efforts and energy only to be left empty-handed. You tapped your foot against the floor, biting your nails in nervousness as time ticked on. Jimin was taking long, and here you were dying in anxiety. At least you were relieved that his mother or brother didn't come to bother you and ruin your mental health. Relief didn't last longer when your mother-in-law appeared there and took a seat across from you. You could feel her intense gaze, but you decided to ignore her. She wasn't your cousin no more. When you said you gave up, you meant it from the bottom of your heart. How does it feel, huh? You must be very happy after taking my son away from me. She spat with absolute heat. You closed your eyes, counting sheep in your head. You had had enough of her misbehavior. Your patience was running thin, and you knew you would lose it any moment if she kept pushing your buttons. Accept you, nor would I forgive you for separating my son from me. She greeted out again, and you lost it. You looked up at her with the same amount of anger. Blaming me, none of it is my fault. Your son is a grown man. He isn't a toddler who is easy to manipulate. He decided everything on his own. So please stop throwing blame at me and stop portraying me as a bad person and yourself as a victim. You retorted, and honestly, you felt good. You had been bearing her nonsense for years. Today, finally, you burst out. She opened her mouth to speak, but you cut her off. No, listen to me now. I'll speak today. You interrupted, your voice steady. Want to blame someone, blame yourself. You are the reason Jimin doesn't want to stay with you anymore. And why this hate for me? What have I even done to you? Is it my fault that I am an orphan? Do you think I can control the cycle of life and death? You finished, your voice cracked in the end, your throat tightening with a rush of emotions. Because trust me, if I could control it, I would have never let my parents die. Nobody can understand the meaning of family more than me, not even you. So stop it. I'm tired of your accusations. It isn't my fault. You whispered as a few tears rolled down your cheeks. But the heartless she-devil had no effect of your tears. She scoffed, her eyes narrowing with more hatred. You wondered if it was only her or more people like her existed who lacked empathy or basic human emotions. Karma is a I wish your kids leave you as you took away my son. Then you will know the pain of a mother. She spat, her voice dripping with hate. It made you wonder if she could stop any words and say more hurtful things because what she did said was already out of her limits. Oh really? You spoke as you harshly wiped your tears. Crying in front of her means bleeding in front of a hungry vampire. If I took away your son, why don't you bring him back? Talk to him. But he doesn't listen to me. You had captured his mind completely. You just can't see beyond his wife. She replied, her voice lowering a few decibels as if the realization was slowly seeping into her head. But why? I have been with him only for 5 years while he has known you for 3 decades. Why won't he listen to you? You asked, raising an eyebrow. You expected. You got no response. She sat there tongue-tied, but her eyes didn't stop glaring. Jimin would have definitely listened to her if her words made any sense to him, but her reasonings were totally meaningless. You held no grudges against her. In fact, you had tried to welcome her into your life with open arms. She was the one who threw away your invite, who crushed your efforts under her feet as if they meant nothing. She never treated you right, and as a husband, Jimin stood by your side. That didn't mean he forgot his role as a son. He reached out, talked to her, and eventually gave up when he saw her showing no sign of understanding his perspective. That is what happens when one person just sticks to their analogy and thinks what other doing is wrong. They completely refuse to understand others' feelings, and it results in them being alone. After all, none likes to stay in the proximity of a narcissistic person. You shook your head in disappointment and pushed off the couch. Arguing with her would be like banging your head against the wall. No harm would occur to the wall, but you would end up with a big bump on your head. You looked around, finding a way away from her. Then you saw the door of the balcony. You trudged towards it and slid the door open and stepped out in the open air. The cold night breeze brushed past your skin as you stepped onto the balcony. You inhaled a deep breath and leaned against the railings. The moon shone brightly among the thousands of twinkling stars. How ironic, you thought, staring at the moon. It was the epitome of beauty, a way of people to confess their love. Despite the scar it carried, people just couldn't stop admiring it, dreaming of reaching it someday. It was only because it was unreachable out of their clutches. Had they ever achieved it someday, the scar would become evident to their eyes. It would become so too big to ignore that they would stop admiring it and it would be left abandoned. Shook your head at your philosophical thoughts. That's when you felt two arms snaking around your waist. You blinked twice, slowly coming back from the land of your thoughts. As the haze in your mind slowly faded, you realized the unfamiliarity of the touch. You instantly pried those arms away and turned around in an instant. Your breathing accelerated when you came face to face with Jaehyun. The ugly smirk on his face roused a sheer desire in you to punch across his face. What do you think you were doing? You snapped, leaning back onto the railings to go as far away from him as you could. He was standing too close as he shouldn't. Come on, Ryan, don't react like you don't want to do these things with me. I noticed how you were looking at me earlier, he muttered, stepping closer to you. His words made you disgusted to your core. stood frozen. Your chest heaved up and down as he lifted his hand to your neck. It was as though your limbs refused to move. You were trying so hard to move, to push him away or to go far away from him, but your body refused to react. Goosebumps spread all over your body when his fingers brushed against your neck. As his hand started trailing down, your instincts kicked in. Your hand swayed in the air before colliding with his cheek. The sound of the slap echoed through the air as his face turned to one side because of the impact. "Stay away from me," you yelled, pushing him away. He stumbled and fell on the nearby couch. You were panting heavily, your eyes red with anger. If looks could kill, he would have turned into ashes by the intensity of your glare. "You know what? I'm gonna tell Jimin and then he will deal with you." You won, your voice low but dangerous, but it did not affect the thick skull. He sat there with a sinister smirk on his lips. "Go on, tell him, but will he believe you?" His words stopped you in your tracks. Your hands twisted at your sides as you struggled to hold back your anger. "Why won't he believe his wife?" You replied, glaring at him with disgust in your eyes. He chuckled, a creepy sound rumbling from his chest. He got up and stood in front of you. "Wouldn't it make it obvious that you are trying to separate him from his family? First his mother and now his brother?" He raised an eyebrow, tilting his head. "I am not," you replied, grating your teeth, frustration bubbling over. "But it seems like you are. I'll tell him that it was you who was trying to hit on me, because what are you doing here when he asked you to wait in the living room?" He shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. You went into deep thought. You weren't at fault, but the situation made you wonder if Jimin would trust you or not. "Do you think he will trust you over his own brother?" he asked, strolling around you in circles. "He will." Your heart screamed, but your mind contradicted. You were torn between your conflicting thoughts, and it seemed impossible to come to a conclusion. "He would never choose a girl over his family. Never. I know my brother." He whispered from behind. Your mind went numb. Your gaze dropped to your feet. Still try and tell him. I can bet you will end up with disappointment." He sat and stared at you a moment longer. Observing you lost in your thoughts, he smirked victoriously and turned on his heels to leave. You heard the door sliding open and then close as you stood there lost in your reverie. A seed of doubt slowly came to life in your mind. Family? He had a family while you had no one. James was right. You were trying to separate Jimin from his family. You shouldn't do that. You should shut your mouth. You shouldn't tell him what Jaehyun did. You shouldn't. You couldn't make him leave his family. "I won't tell him." "Yes, I won't," you mumbled to yourself as tears pooled in your eyes.